Chalo. In this particular recording, we're going to talk about chapter 4. And which essay we're going to talk about? Essay 610. Important essay. Sad part, entire essay is mug. Okay, but an interesting and important essay also. Interesting, why? Because everything is too much of practicality. Mugging is there, too much of mugging, but you'll understand it. What is the essay heading telling? Essay 610. Using the work of internal auditors. What? Using the work of internal auditors. We are not going to talk about internal audit function. We are going to talk about using the work of internal auditors. Who is going to use whose work? It is the statutory auditor who is going to use the work of internal auditors. You know, there are two types of auditors. One is called as stat auditors, which we are discussing in the entire syllabus, and one is something called as internal auditors. I just want to give a heads up. These internal auditors, in this particular essay, we are going to talk as if the company, they have hired internal auditors within their company. Stat auditors are never hired, they are not employees. They are like consultants. Similarly, here, internal auditors generally they can be hired like stat auditors, but nowadays big companies and all, they don't hire them. They keep them as their employees. There'll be a separate department like HR department, sales department, purchase department. There'll be a separate department called as internal audit department. Instead of the word department, we use the word function. Same thing, internal audit function. These companies, they'll have this internal audit function. What is the role of this internal audit function? What do they do? My answer will be very simple. Whatever a stat audit does, same thing internal auditors also does. But one thing extra, if you remember, operating activities. Internal auditors check each and every chitta kitta A to Z of the company. Even pure operational activities of the company also are checked by internal auditors. Pure operational activities are not checked by auditors, stat auditors. Understood? Kya? Okay. So in detail, if I tell you the objective and scope of internal audit function includes assurance. They also give some kind of assurances because they do internal auditing. They give an internal audit report. Taken off. They give some consulting activities wherever there is worthwhile suggestions can be given by the internal auditors where they can improve, or that they will give it, and to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of entities, government process, risk management, and internal control. If I tell you in detail, they are given everything. First, activities relating to governance. Governance as in how the company is governed, what are the policies and procedures, how they are being framed, whether those policies and procedures are followed by the employees or not. Everything, how the company is structured, each and everything which is checked by a normal auditor, they check it, but even more detailed way. Taken. Then comes related to risk management. Even we identify risk of material misstatement due to fraud and error. Even they identify risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Same puppies. Then comes relating to internal controls. This particular point number 3, they ask as it a separate question. Even we check internal controls. Even they check internal controls. Even we evaluate internal controls. We evaluated, no? Correct or not? We evaluate internal controls with those 4 methods. Narrative record, checklist, internal control. Even they evaluate the internal controls. Even we examine the financial and operating information. Yes, even they check the financial and operating information. Review of operating activities. This is something which they do, but we don't do it. Pure operating activities. And last one, review of compliance with laws and regulations. Even we check whether proper laws and regulations which are applicable in the company has been followed by the entity or not. Similarly, even internal auditors, even before the stat auditor comes, these internal audit people will make sure that the company is complying with all the laws and regulations. Correct? And then internal auditors will make one internal auditors report. Understood? That is how we have learned SA, standards on auditing. There is something called as SIA. SIA, standards on internal auditing, which is not there in a syllabus. It is not there in a CA final also, because we are learning it from the stat auditor point of view. Understood? Okay. So this is definitely a mug question. I would suggest point number 3, mug it thoroughly. Rest headings you mug it, that is more than enough. Governance, risk management, internal controls. Now, the heading says we are going to use the work of internal auditors. Correct or not? So then what are the different ways? What are the different ways in which the external auditor can make the use of the internal auditors? There are 3 ways. How many ways? 3 ways. Can you see 1, 2, 3? There are 3 ways. One is to obtain any relevant information for the purpose of audit. External auditors. External auditors means stat auditors. Whatever information is relevant to your audit and it is there with the internal auditors, can you ask them? You can ask them. So to obtain any information. Second one, until unless it is prohibited. That means if it is prohibited, point number 2, you cannot do it. If it is prohibited by law regulation, then external auditors, point number 2, you cannot do it. But if it is not prohibited, point number 2, can you do it? Yes, you can do it. What is it? You can use some work of the internal auditor which is performed by the internal auditor, but you can use it as a partial substitution. Partial substitution matlab 50%. Something which you have done, rest 50% you couldn't do it, but it was done by internal auditors. You can use that also. Partial substitution for audit evidence which is to be obtained directly by the external auditor. Something which the external auditor was supposed to do, but 50% only he could do it. 50 or 30, whatever it is. Partially he did it, partially he can get it from the internal auditors. And last one, which is the most important, frequently tested in the examination, something called as direct assistance. What is direct assistance? If you see point number 1 and 2, it was something that we were gathering some information from the internal auditors. Point number 3 says we are not gathering information. We are calling the internal auditors. We are telling them what audit procedure you are supposed to perform, and you will perform under my supervision, my direction. It is like I'm the stat auditor, he's the internal auditor. Come here, you go perform that particular procedure on that particular item and get me audit evidence under my direction, under my supervision. Understood? I am giving it to him and I have to direct and supervise him. That is a point number 3. So how many ways like you can use internal auditors? 3. 1, obtain any information which is relevant to the audit. Second, any audit evidence which was supposed to be obtained by external auditors, but partially you can substitute with the internal auditors audit evidence. And third one, direct assistance. That means you are going to call the internal auditors, tell them to perform audit procedures under your direction and supervision. Understood? Kya? Perfect. Kya? Scope you can read it on your own. 2.4 CBQ. CBQ, you tell me. CBQ means case-based question. You think and tell me. Who is doing the entire audit? External auditor. Who is giving the opinion on the company? External auditor. Tomorrow, can he tell कि one of the part was checked by an internal auditor and he used it? Can he use external auditor? You can use the work of internal auditor? Yes, you can. Correct or not? And if that particular area there was some misstatement, can the external auditor tomorrow tell, okay, this was though done by internal auditor, don't call me? Who gave the opinion? External auditor. Who did the signing? External auditor. You were responsible for it. You took the information. It is your responsibility to scrutinize it, check it properly, and then you put it. No, ultimately you give the opinion. You are responsible for everything. Understood what I'm trying to tell? This the entire thing is written that only. External auditor, you are responsible for the entire audit. You cannot blame the internal auditor that he had did this particular work. Ultimately, who gave the opinion? You gave the opinion. Understood? Kya? Then objectives of external auditor, very simple. Take it. What is the objective of external auditor? See, first thing is to determine whether the work of the internal audit, in which areas you want to use and to what extent you want to use. In which areas you want to use the internal auditor and to what extent, how much detailed work you want to use of the internal auditor. Second one, if you're using the work of internal auditors, then whether the work which is performed by that person, whether it is adequate for the purpose of audit or not. For example, you told him to check something related to stock. He checked it. And he'll give you some report, some kind of evidence. Check whether that work which is performed is adequate for your audit or not. If you would have been in that position, you would have checked 5 things. He has checked only 3 things. So you would have checked, okay, whether whatever work he has performed, whether it is adequate for your audit or not. And last one, if you're using the internal auditors to provide direct assistance, you remember, call him, tell him what to perform. If you're using for that particular purpose, please appropriately supervise him, appropriately give him direction. Understood? Because in the first 2 points, you remember, we were not giving any direction. Whatever they perform, we're going to use that. But third one, we are going to tell them what to perform. Hey, am I right? Then the most important, see, whenever an auditor is using somebody, if you remember, when we were appointed as an auditor in chapter 11 and chapter 2, chapter 11 especially, I was telling that we were going to check the management's integrity, and our own competence. Our own competence also we were checking, no, whether my team members are that much experienced in there or not. Same thing here. We are going to use the work of an internal auditor. We are going to use the work of an internal auditor. We are going to check 3 things about the internal auditor. Internal auditor, do you have that much of competence or not? Just imagine the internal auditor's team of a company, all like 11th standard, 12th standard BCom students. Will you use their work? You will use it, but up to 11 only, because they are not that professional. For example, all chartered accountants, you will be having that level, no, chartered account competence. CS, yes, competence. CM is some professional degree, or else, chalo, no degree, but he is in that field for last 15 years. Experience matters. So competence basically. So you're going to check their competence because you're going to use their work. Correct or not? Then something called as objectivity. Objectivity, you remember we did IOCP square. IOCP square, and that O was objectivity. What was objectivity? Without any biasness, free of conflict of interest, not under anybody's influence. Same thing here also. We are going to check about the internal auditors, whether they are free from influence or not. Being very open. As stat auditors, we must be completely independent from the company. But you think and tell me, will these internal auditors will be as independent like us? No. I told you they are the employees of the company. So they have to be independent, but not independent like us. Correct or not? But little independence is required, because even they are doing some kind of audit on, some verification on, So if you see as an external auditor, this internal auditors department, completely influenced by the management. That means whatever the management is telling, they're doing that only. You tell me, will you use their work? You will not. So you're going to check their competence, you're going to check their objectivity, whether are they under their influence or not. And third point, you're going to check something which we checked in ourselves also. What? Quality control. We used to check our own quality control, in our firm. We are going to check their quality control also. Whether are they using all those systematic approaches, quality control approaches in doing the work. Correct or not? Yeah. If they are having quality control, you will use more of their work. So 3 things we check about the internal auditors. What are those 3 things? Objectivity, competence, and quality control. Understood? Yeah. Now in detail, they have explained one more thing. What and all things under objectivity, competence you're going to check. See, objective what you're going to check, competence what you're going to check, and systematic discipline approach what you're going to check. So these two are mug questions. One is this objectivity and one is this competence. So objectivity, I already told you. What is objectivity? It refers to the ability to perform tasks without any biasness, without any conflict of interest, or without any influence. So what are those factors? The question is all factors, right? These 4 points come off. What are those factors which are going to check? First, check whether the ability of the function to be free from any biasness. Check whether whenever they are working, whatever they are working, whatever they're doing, are they under the influence of the management or are they not under the influence of management? Are they using their own judgments or they are completely influenced by the management? First point, you're going to check that. Second one, check the overseeing the employment decision. Who's overseeing? Whether TCWG is overseeing the employment decisions or not. See, whenever they're hiring internal auditors, TCWG, please show little interest. Check whether who you're employing in your company as internal auditors. Correct or not? Tomorrow a company is going to employ you. Don't you think they're going to ask your resume? What you have done, what is the experience? Similarly, we are going to use the work of internal auditors. So we are going to check whether when they are getting employed, whether the TCWG is checking whether who's getting employed or not. Chuma, they're employing anybody in their company. Correct or not? That we are going to check. Third one. That means if I tell you a point, it is not compulsory that an internal auditor must be a chartered accountant. Even a normal without a degree can also be an internal auditor. There are certified courses, 1-year courses, diploma courses. That person can also be internal auditor. But stat auditor, only a chartered accountant. Okay. Then comes whether there are any constraints or restrictions which are put upon by the management on the internal auditors. If you remember, we had restriction scope on us also. If the management used to put any limitation restriction, would you continue as an auditor? What would you do? Would you withdraw from the audit engagement? Correct or not? Similarly, check whether internal auditors ke upar, whether they have kept any limitation. If they have kept any limitation or restriction on the internal auditors, that means in that particular area there is some fraud. Correct or not? Then comes whether the internal audit function is free of any conflicting responsibilities. You know what is conflicting responsibility? Something which is outside their scope. Please give them those work only which is well within their scope. Something which is not under their scope, please don't give it to them. So whether the internal audit function is free of any conflict of interest, for example, having managerial operational duties or responsibilities that are outside the internal audit function. Understood? Yeah. Then comes competence. Competence is all about skills, knowledge, experience, expertise. So what are those factors? What are those factors which you are going to check whether internal audit function has competence or not? First one, whether they are adequately and appropriately resourced relative to the size. Reliance Industry, such a huge company. You see the internal audit department, you open up the cabinet, there are 3 members sitting. Are they adequately resourced? 3 are, day 30 minimum should be there. Appropriate is all 3 are, one is BCom graduate, one is CS, one is CMA. I have at least one CA. Reliance Industries, yeah. Correct or not? Yeah. So adequately and appropriately resourced. Then establishing policies for hiring, training, and assigning. Whenever you are hiring internal auditors, we did one point, no? Oversee the employment decisions. Please, whenever you hire internal auditors, check whether whom you are hiring. Please check their resume. Please check their professional degree. Please check their qualification. Please check their experience. Give them some kind of training. When you join as an employee, they'll train you, know. Check whether they're giving the training or not. Then adequate technical training and proficiency in auditing. Whatever it is, do you have any experience in auditing or not? That you check. And last one, whether they have any knowledge about the entities AFRF or not. Ultimately, they must have knowledge about what the company is all about, what the company's business is, what the company's applicable financial reporting framework talking all about. Understood? Kya? That internal department, no, till last year they were doing audit of some other FMCG company. Now they are appointed in a automobile company. They must have good idea about automobile company also. Understood? Kya? Accordingly, you're going to use their work. Am I right? If it is their first year, will you use more of their work? No, because it's their first year. Am I right? Yes. Discipline approach, it is very basic. Taken up. You just have to check whether they are document. Like one of the most important thing under quality control is documentation. Same thing here also, whether they are documenting everything or not. Every internal audit procedures which they are preparing, they have to document it. And appropriate quality control policies and procedures are being followed by the internal audit function or not. Understood? Kya? 2.7, very simple. Circumstances when work of internal audit cannot be used. Very simple. 2.6 we did know. They must have objectivity. They must be having competence. They must be having quality control. If you put not in front of each of those 3 points, 2.7 is ready. See, functions, organization status, relevant policies and procedures do not adequately support the objectivity. Function lacks, do not have competence. Function does not apply systematic and disciplined approach. Just add not. Understood? Kya? Then this is very simple. Determining the nature and extent of the work of internal audit function that can be used. When you want to decide what kind of work you want to use, nature, what extent you want to use, examples they have given key in which area you can use the work. This box, it is basically the areas where we can use the work of an internal auditor. Can you use the work of testing of operating effectiveness of controls? Yes, because internal controls was well within the scope of an internal auditor. You remember? First 3 points, governance, one was internal control. So can you use the work of internal controls? Yes. Can you use the work where procedures are performed but involving what kind of judgment? Limited judgment. See, judgment is all about uncertainties, subjectivity. So use the work of internal auditors in those areas where the judgment is limited. If it is very uncertain, very big judgment, then you yourself make that judgment. Don't use the work of internal auditors. Observations of inventory counts. If they're doing inventory counts, they will do observation. Can you use that work? Yes. Tracing transaction through information system, some kind of related to accounting software, accounting system, can you use it? Yes. Testing of compliance with regulatory requirements, they would have checked GST paid or not paid, income tax paid or not paid, regulatory requirements, ESI, PF paid or not paid. Can you use that? Yes, you can. Any doubts here? Then 2.9, what is it telling? Circumstances in which the external auditor shall plan to use dash of the work, less of the, matlab you use the work of internal auditor, but use it less. What are those situations where we're going to use the work less? First point, wherever more judgment is involved in both planning and in both evaluating. Correct or not? Higher the assessed RM, if a particular area like stock, the RMM is very high, please use less of his work. Perform more of your own work. Less of internal audit functions, organizational status. You think and tell me, what is the meaning of this status? Status basically talks about the professional degree. If you see that the internal auditors are all just BCom graduates, you tell me you'll use more of their work or less of their work. That's because they don't represent that status. If they're chartered accountants, CS, CMAs, you're going to use more of their works. Am I right? And last one, lower level of competence. If you feel they don't have that knowledge, that experience, that competence, that skills, don't use too much of the work, use less of the work. Any doubt still here? Any doubt still here? Pakka? Shall I continue? Using the work of internal audit function. So they're telling if the external auditor is planning to use the work of internal function, then the external auditor shall do something. What is it? See, there are two different teams who are going to work together. So don't you think first there must be a proper discussion between them? Discussion between whom? External and internal auditor. About what? About the planned use of the work. I'll tell no as an external auditor, internal auditor, see, I actually want to use your work regarding stock and regarding purchases. Once I tell him, he'll be aware. Yeah, external auditor is going to use. Let us perform it better, perform it properly, correct or not? Then read the reports of internal audit function. Yes, he will do the internal audit. He'll make the report. Can I read the report? Can I read the internal audit report? Yes, it is my right. I can read the internal because internal audit function is well within the entity, and we have learned auditors have given the rights to do inquiry, to ask information from anybody within the entity, unrestricted access. You remember? Correct. And last one, performing sufficient procedures on the body of the work of internal audit function as a whole. Please perform procedures on the body of internal auditors. That means check their objectivity, check their integrity, check their competence, check their quality control. Understood? Kya? Then this is very simple. Ki it is always better to have a proper discussion, and please have a proper coordination between whom? Between the external auditors and internal auditors. Why? Because it will be useful. If you have a proper discussion and if you have a proper coordination between whom? Between the external and internal auditors, it will be useful. For what purpose? The timing of such work. When you want to use that work, when you want the internal auditors to perform that work, timing, the nature of the work, what kind of work you want them to perform, the nature, the extent of audit coverage. You're going to tell them, look, how much I want audit evidence from you, extent, materiality. You share the materiality, correct or not? And proposed methods of item selection and sample sizes. SA 530, audit sampling. We're going to tell them, when you do audit sampling, this is the method which you follow, correct or not? Documentation and review. All these things will be useful if you properly discuss and coordinate. And when, this is a separate question, huh? This is a separate question. Now the next point talks about when can a person tell that the coordination between both of them is very effective. This one was, why is it beneficial to have a proper coordination? This is, when can somebody say that the coordination is effective? When I would say, as a third person, I would say that the coordination between external and internal is very effective when if I see discussions between them are being taken place at regular intervals. Regularly they are communicating. The more you communicate, the more better your coordination will be. Correct or not? External auditor informs the internal function of the significant matters that may affect the function. As an external auditor, I know few areas where the risk is very high. I'm going to explain to the internal auditor that these are the areas which are very significant. Please do the work here thoroughly. And third one, external auditor is advised of and has access to relevant reports of the internal audit function and is informed of any significant matters that have come attention to the function. Ulta of point number 2. What is ulta point number 2? Whatever significant matters have come to the knowledge of internal auditors, they are also sharing it with us. They are giving their reports to us. Basically, all the 3 points are related to communication only. The more you communicate, the more effective your coordination is. Understood kya? Pakka kya? Okay. Next, the external auditor shall not use an internal auditor to provide direct assistance. Now, this entire 2.11, no, it is talking about the third way of using the internal auditors. Third way, first way was to obtain information. Second one was for the partial substitution. Third one was for direct assistance. See the heading, determining whether in which areas and to what extent auditors can be used as to provide. So this entire 2.11 is just talking about direct assistance. So first they told external auditor, please do not use internal auditors to provide direct assistance if there are significant threats to the objectivity. If you see that the internal auditors are clear cut biased, fully influenced by the management, don't use the work of internal auditors for direct assistance, because there is no use, no, because you're going to tell them what procedures to be performed, but they are going to do what management says. Second, internal auditor lacks competence. If you see that they don't have any knowledge, any experience, any history background, don't use their work. Understood kya? Then second question, here it is, external auditor shall not use the internal auditors to provide direct assistance to perform procedures. If I tell you, this is also not to use the work of internal auditor, but like a heading wise, if these 2 points are there, don't use their work. Next, they're talking about these procedures, no, you don't use their work. These particular procedures, this is like the main head. If this is the case, don't use the work of internal auditors. This question talks about these particular procedures, no, what was direct assistance, telling them what procedures to perform. If these 3 procedures are there, no, these 4 procedures are there, no, please don't use the work of internal auditors for direct assistance. These 4 procedures, you do it on your own. What are those procedures? First, judgments, but which are very significant. Normal limited judgment, you use it. Significant judgment, you use it, because judgments are based on subjectivity, uncertainty. You have to use too much of knowledge, too much of experience is required. Hey, am I right? Then if it relates to a area where the ROMM is very high. Third one, relates to the work with internal auditors, has been involved with them, and which has already been or will be reported to the management or TCWG by the internal function. Something which is actually to be performed by internal auditors only, which has either been performed or which is going to be performed by the internal auditors, and which they are going to report it to the management. If they are already done it, or if they are already going to do it, why again you're going to tell them? Understood? Third point, it is telling it that procedure, no, that procedure which are going to give them, it relates to a work. It relates to a work which with the internal auditors have been involved. Matlab already they are performed, and which has already been or will be reported to the management TCWG by the internal audit function. Some work which is already related to the internal audit function, which is being performed, which is going to be reported, or which has already been reported to the management. Again, don't tell them to perform the same thing. And last one, relates to a decision, very important, relates to a decision the external auditor has to make in accordance with this essay. Basically, if I tell you, we had to check the competence, objectivity and quality control about internal auditors. Can you give that procedure to internal auditors? Can internal auditors, you go check your own objectivity, competence in this? Can you do it? No, because it is something which a decision who has to make? External auditor has to make as per this essay. So as per this essay, it has been told, external auditor, you are supposed to make decisions regarding how much work has to be used, when to be used, when not to be used. You make the decision. Don't give that decision power to internal auditors. Understood? This was asked in RTP. This is very important. From here till here, it is asked in your RTP May 25. Take care. It is asked कि whenever you should not use the work of internal auditors for performing these particular procedures. Plus one important point, prior to using the work of internal auditors for direct assistance. That means whenever you have planned that you're going to use the work of internal auditors for direct assistance, whenever you have planned that you're going to use the work of internal auditors for direct assistance, before you give them that work, 2 things have to be taken. What things? 2 things. Both are related to written representation. You remember written representation, we take something writing, written representation from the management. Here also we are going to take 2 things in writing, one from the internal auditors, one from the management. One thing is we are going to take in writing from the management. Management, listen, you have an internal audit department. I'm going to use them as a direct assistance. Please, you give it to me in writing. Management, you give it to me in writing that tomorrow you will not interfere between us. Tomorrow, nahi to chumma der ka, how did you use the internal auditors, this, that. If you have a problem, tell it now. Nahi to give it in writing that you don't have any problem. Nahi to tomorrow I give him a work, chumma, you will come and interfere. So give it to me in writing that you will not interfere in between us. Whom we are taking this written representation from? Management. Second, you are going to take this written representation from the Internal auditors, listen to me. I am a stat auditor. I have to maintain something called as confidentiality. Take now. So you are going to do work under me. So you'll be having all my audit evidence regarding that work. Better don't share that work with anybody. Give it to me in writing. If tomorrow you share it with somebody else, I'll sue you. Understood kya? So written representation, two written representation prior to direct assistance. One is from the management, one is from the internal auditors. From the management, it is because they don't have to interfere, and from internal auditors, so that they don't share the data with somebody else. Understood kya? This again, it's a very beautiful question. It is a difference between internal financial control and reporting requirements. Here it is, distinction between IFC and ICS. If you have listened to me thoroughly, my regular classes, and now there are two things. One is internal control system, which we discussed in chapter 3 in detail, correct? Evaluation of internal control system, understanding of internal control system, and we did one more topic in chapter 3, IFCs, internal financial control, that boxes for reporting, audit committee, independent auditors. I told you IFCs is as similar to internal control system only. There's a slight difference between both of them. You know what is that? Internal control system, what we check is purely that area which the management has implemented over financial reporting. That is why we use the word internal control system over financial reporting. Matlab, we check those controls which directly has an impact on the financial statements. Anything related to financial statements, not even finance, financial statements. The difference between IFCs, the heading if you see it is internal financial controls. That means they are including all those controls wherever finance is involved. So don't you think operational activities, there also finance is involved, correct? Or operating under money is involved. Over there also controls will be there. Two raw materials now, one finished good should come, this quality should come. That is not covered under ICS, internal control system. What we check is internal control system over financial reporting. But under internal financial controls, anything, everything, wherever finance is involved, those controls. You understood kya? So whose scope is more wider? It is internal financial controls, because we check internal controls only which has an effect on financial statements directly. Stock records, CCTV cameras, lockers, drawers, all this directly has an impact on the financial statements. But internal financial controls cover those areas also where it is not directly impacting the financial statements, purely based on operations. Understood? That is, if you see, internal financial control is a wider term, as internal control system over FR is a narrow term restricted only to entities internal controls over financial reporting. Financial reporting matlab financial statements. See, it is written, the term IFC refers to policies and procedures put in place by the companies only for compliances with this. On the other hand, internal control over financial reporting is required, where an auditor are required to express an opinion on the effectiveness of internal controls over financial reporting. The most important line, such opinion is in addition to and distinct from the opinion expressed by the auditor on the financial statements. Understood kya? Any doubts kya? With this we are done with essay 610.